Hi, I'm Matt Knight, Executive Director of Strategic Revenue here at Spiceworks Ziff Davis, or SWZD. And we sit in a really unique position in the B2B tech marketplace where we're at the nexus because of the properties that we manage and own, like the Spiceworks community or toolbox, where real engaged IT and B2B tech buyers come to interact with the world's largest tech brands. And that interaction happens digitally for us all day, every second. What we wanted to do is bring that interaction to the virtual table in a series focused on unscripted open dialogue between the world's largest tech brands and real IT people centered around COVID-19. And the reason that this is important is that business continuity has been maintained because of the IT infrastructure that's enabling a globally remote workforce, and the innovation that the tech counterpart, the tech vendors, have invested years in to enable. And so what we wanted to have is bring those two together and see what comes of it. Talk about the current state and what the IT folks have seen versus what the vendors are seeing. Talk about future states and where we think this is going to have an impact on infrastructure and emerging technologies and digital transformation, etc. So please enjoy what should be a really interesting engagement between subject matter expertise on the product innovator side, as well as subject matter expertise in the IT frontline side.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be talking about a very important topic during the Spiceworks Ziff Davis video meetup, the impacts on the IT industry of COVID-19 and the rush to remote work that followed. Today, we'll explore this important topic from multiple sides of the industry with guests representing the IT buyer side, in addition to IT marketers and consultants on the IT vendor side, so we'll have a pretty balanced conversation. On the show, we'll talk about where we are today in what's been called the remote working revolution. We'll talk about the implications of this shift when employees increasingly work from anywhere as we explore what's next and how IT will continually adjust to this new reality. But first, some introductions. My name is Peter Tsai, and I'll be your moderator today. I'm the Senior Technology Analyst at Spiceworks Ziff Davis, and I'll be introducing some facts and figures, including data from research that I work on that's based on feedback from IT professionals in the Spiceworks community, a platform used by millions of IT pros every month to learn about technology, solve IT problems, and connect with IT vendors and peers. Also, I'll be introducing commentary from the community straight from the mouths of IT pros to add to the conversation. So really briefly, I'll go around the circle and then you can talk about yourselves. We have from Dell, Jessica Carter, who is the Marketing Director of US Medium Business. So hello, Jessica. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your role, and how you've interacted with IT buyers during this crisis?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Peter. So as you mentioned, I lead North America marketing for our medium business segment at Dell Technologies. And what that means is I get the opportunity to help our sales team and our channel partners engage and interact with our customers every day, as well as directly interact with them with our events and our content and all the great resources we provide them. What we hear from our IT partners and our customers is that they really do need help kind of getting through the latest pandemic from shifting to doing it light to doing it right. And so that's what we're spending a lot of time talking to our customers about today.
Very cool, and looking forward to hearing more from you. Next up, we have Justin Williams, President and CEO of Control Alt IT. So Justin, can you tell us what Control Alt IT is, and also tell us a little bit more about how you've been working with different IT departments?
Sure, yeah. I manage Control Alt IT. We're a pretty small MSP, managed service provider, for those who aren't into lingo in the IT world. We manage IT for various customers, different sizes, very small all the way up to 200, 250 employees. We mostly focus on the healthcare vertical, but do have some customers in finance and nonprofit, et cetera. I think Jessica had the best phrase there, which is doing it right instead of doing it light. We did certainly have a lot of customers taken by surprise who weren't normally geared towards working remotely. So there's a lot to explore there, and looking forward to having the conversation.
Yeah, and we'll definitely touch upon those points later. But before we do that, let's introduce the man, the myth, the legend. You probably recognize him if you've been on some Spiceworks events in the past. Jeff Gretler, our Global Director of IT Operations here at Spiceworks Ziff Davis. Jeff, tell us about yourself.
Hey, team. Good to be back. I feel like it's been a little while. Grew out the hair, beard, like everyone else, quarantine face. But for those who don't know me, so Jeff Gretler, I've actually been a part of Spiceworks for 9 years now. I've been in the technology industry for 21 years, which is scary to say out loud that it's been that long. So, but obviously, like the rest of us, I don't think we're living in unprecedented times as a planet, much less as an industry. So it's been a lot of learning, a lot of figuring out what worked and what didn't work. So that's what's going to make this conversation, because we're all still feeling the tinge a little bit. So it's going to be good to talk about it. Like I always talked about some of our old shows. This is like therapy, right? We can talk through our tech problems.
There you go. All right, let's get straight into the therapy session then. So Jeff, let's rewind back to the point of your trauma. So yes. Going back to March 2020, the rush to go remote. The orders are coming down from up on high to get everybody set up to work from home. And we have a figure in the Spiceworks community from one of our polls saying only 14% of companies said that they were completely prepared, meaning the vast majority of organizations had to scramble to do something. They had to buy new hardware, they had to get new software, sign up for new services, or reevaluate their DR plans because they didn't consider pandemics at all. So Jeff, go back to that time. What was happening with you and your peers, and what problems did you have to deal with, and are they solved today, or do you think there's still a lot of issues out there that have gone unresolved?
Yeah, it was a very surreal time. I mean, it was the paradigm shift for a lot of things, as we know. Like you said, as far as like business continuity and disaster recovery, this was something that wasn't counted on, right? That it was just like, we almost had like a countdown clock rather than boom, the building disappeared, the building flooded, the building's on fire. And we didn't have any of that. We basically we have a countdown clock. We have to get everybody out of there. So we knew that, okay, whatever disaster recovery we have and whatever remote workers we have to fast forward and make sure that we were ready for it. So luckily we were, I think we were one of the lucky ones, but there were still a lot of things that basically this smoked out what worked, what was working and what wasn't working really fast, because most of us probably had, that 20% remote workforce when all of a sudden now you have 100% remote workforce. How do you handle it as far as like hardware, access, who has what at home? How do you stop employees from basically grabbing everything off their desk and running out the door, in a non-orderly fashion? So it was something that I guess the best way to explain it happened really fast in a slow fashion.
Okay. And Justin, I see a knowing grin on your face. How have you been helping IT professionals? Jeff had mentioned grabbing everything and running off. I know we've talked previously about tons of things being sold out. Can you also take us back to that time and what you experienced?
Sure. So right away, we had one customer who actually got their phones from another vendor who told everyone in the business office, "Oh, just go home, plug your phone into your internet, it'll be fine." It didn't work that way. And so then there was a lot of panic setting in. We never thought about remote phones. We just assumed that it would work. And, didn't have VPN point-to-point technology, anything that would let those phones work remotely. So there was definitely some panicking with relations, VoIP. a lot of the healthcare industry, they're just not geared to working from home. They're patient interactions, or they're in a business office that's actually attached to the hospital. So while executives may work from home normally, building managers and health record management people typically wouldn't. There was a laptop shortage, as well as firewall and teleworker stuff. It was just nobody could get their hands on it because there was a run on the bank. And so customers who were not typically geared for work from home really were held up or had to come up with some sort of temporary solution to get through. But I think Jeff said it right, which is it happened very quickly but very slowly. So the onset was very fast. But the remediation took some time while we looked at options, and at the same time customers were being cautious about their expenditures because you know what the economy was going to look like going into the summer. So while they might have needed several $1,000s in new equipment, at the same time they weren't real sure about the revenue. So that was another big challenge for them.
All right. And Jessica, you've already mentioned that you've talked to a lot of customers. What challenges have you been noticing that they've been facing regularly, and what kind of technologies have they used to help get through those challenges?
Yeah, I don't think it's lost on any of us that even before the pandemic hit, when we talked to our IT decision makers and our IT buyers, they were already swamped, right? They had a list of projects they were trying to go do. They had a vision. They were also kind of constantly pulled into managing the fire drills. And then add on this pandemic, and all of a sudden it just kind of exploded, right? All of these long-term visionary projects were now mandated to your point, be done immediately. People, for the longest time, the IT industry has been talking about a digital first infrastructure and how critical it is to enable remote work, to enable on easy access to data, and to enable security within that remote universe. And here it was, is in a flash of a minute, all of a sudden the positioning and the desire to have a digital first infrastructure was now mandated. And what we saw customers who were asking for help in a very, very quick way was, hey, something that I might have taken months to plan and deploy now needed to do it in weeks, if not days. And so being able to react quickly to the needs of our customers, but also understand what are those Band-Aid solutions we could put in place so that, as we go into the rest of this year, now where do we need to go kind of more systematically and strategically think how we support the business?
Okay. Going back to Jeff, speaking of all these changes that were going underway, you're now trying to support all of these systems that are at people's houses. They're trying to access the servers back in the office where there's probably some bandwidth issues and bottlenecks. Can you talk a little bit more about the technologies that IT professionals have had challenges with?
Yeah, I mean, we've all heard the saying that we changed the tire while the car is moving, but now we're changing the tires for multiple cars moving at the same time, and they're not all going in the same direction. So yeah, it's a huge challenge, and basically, this was the equivalent of turning something off and seeing what doesn't work, right? So now all of a sudden you're finding people, like Justin was saying, that don't normally work remotely. They're used to just going in and having everything available. Now you're finding out in real time as they need it, what can and cannot be accessed. So I think, like you're saying, the firewall was big as far as being able to access stuff remotely, and VPNs. VPN was a big one because, again, normally if you weren't a remote workforce, it's something that you never had to deal with. And then on top of these other technologies now, which, I've always said security is 100% interest to all IT professionals. Now we just up the stakes because now all of a sudden you have these multiple points of entries all over the world and figuring out how to get them onto your network. So I think it's been a compounded issue of all these software suites and their availability, the hardware to access this stuff, and then doing it securely on top of that. That's been a huge challenge and an ongoing challenge, right? Because now that it's simmering down a little, but it doesn't seem to be ending anytime soon. Now it's like, okay, now maybe you got it, but now we have to fine tune it and keep testing it.
Yeah, and I want to get to that point about fine tuning. But before we do that, Justin, because a lot of your clients are in the healthcare space where security is very important, can you maybe elaborate on what Jeff said from your perspective and maybe talk about some secure technologies you've been implementing?
Yes. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because there was just a swath of security challenges and breaches just that happened. If we were paying attention to cybersecurity news, we had local governments and court systems and big breaches at health information companies, and we were not immune to that. We had a customer who, because of the shift to working from home, suddenly they're using personal equipment in their house which may not have corporate antivirus, and in a rush to get access to servers, they were given things they wouldn't normally be given without a lot of vetting. And we had an executive partner level person at one of our customers who was running some pirated software, who ended up with a keylogger, and we determined that he had gotten in, and it was just, normally we wouldn't allow that access to begin with from a personal device, and in the mad rush, this one slipped through the cracks. And I think that happened across the board for a lot of different companies who do have good rigid security policies, but things kind of went on hold in the mad dash. So certainly this was a good opportunity to talk to the customers about MDM and some sort of compliance with home security anyways, just because it's a good idea if you ever do remote in. And a lot of customers who do normally remote in don't think about the security of the home devices. And if you're doing point to point VPN, where they've actually bought teleworker equipment, you don't just want to have them plug that into their internet and suddenly their Xbox is piggybacking off of the corporate internet. And so if you're not careful with your hairpinning and your VPN traffic utilization, you may be bogging down the network back at corporate unnecessarily. So sometimes we forget about the finer things when we're trying to accomplish a big goal in a hurry. It's just natural progression. So I think a good opportunity to have discussions about customers who wouldn't normally work from home being ready. And I think the whole world kind of understands that this can happen again anytime, right? It's not going to be something you're going to get a lot of notice on. So having the ability to shift dynamically. And say the customers who handled it the most smoothly was, we do have a good chunk of our customer base on Horizon. So they were already in a VDI situation, and there really wasn't any big risk from home devices because they're still sandboxed away from the corporate environment. Their personal computer isn't necessarily getting on the network. So those customers were definitely in a better position than people who needed to suddenly connect to servers and files from their home network. So big opportunity to have discussions about security training and have antivirus software that can extend to multiple computers, not necessarily just corporate owned assets.
Okay. And Jessica, I know Dell has a lot of different technologies that can help enable remote working. Can you speak a little bit to those and how they've helped your various customers around the world?
Yeah, from an endpoint perspective, we actually just launched a new Latitude series that has built-in conference capability and that has security built into the device. So anything we create at Dell Technologies always has security built in, because it is the cornerstone of any company, is keeping their data secure. A couple other examples we often talk to our customers about is, what are their pain points? One would be, how do you manage remotely? And so we do also have a lot of solutions built into our technology, like our iDRAC solution built into our servers that anyone can access at ready. And then we also even launched a new storage system in PowerStore that allows you to scale as you need. So the number one effort that we always try to put forward is how do we enable our customers to be as flexible as possible, especially in the data center, and to buy what they need. And so you're going to continue to see that as we bring new products to market, and the ones that we launched over the summer, to give that IT manager the flexibility to only pay, especially given this time and the criticality of our budgets, only pay on what is getting pulled down from the employee base.
Okay, and I'm going to move over to Jeff really quick. So we've talked about, we rewound to March 2020. Now let's come into the present. So do you think there are still a lot of issues to be resolved? In that time, only 14% of companies said that they're fully prepared. But how prepared do you think companies are today? And do you think this unprecedented crisis has changed how businesses view IT and how they view disaster recovery as well?
Yeah, I think this, this kind of proved on a short term, we may have fixed a lot of the short term solutions, but now it's only really been 4 months, and we're going to need to see like long-term solutions, and we're going to be looking for, when any kind of purchasing we do here on out, whether it's hardware or software, we're basically purchasing for a new business paradigm, for a new form of employee. I think you called it a revolution before, maybe it's the remote revolution. That's what we're going to be planning for from here on out. There's no, I don't think there's going to be this, I think it was very static, and it was almost like a privilege to work from home or to work from anywhere, as they're calling it, where now it's going to be something that's mandatory. So every decision that you make when it comes to your IT infrastructure is going to be having to count on this work from anywhere scenario.
Yeah, and I have some great data points to bring up. This remote working revolution, or some people are saying that remote work is the new normal. So in a poll in Spiceworks, 80% of IT pros said they want to work remotely at least part of the time, even after COVID-19, the crisis has subsided. Additionally, the businesses also are in line. So almost half of businesses represented in that survey said they are either investigating long-term flexible work or they've already implemented it now, even before the crisis is over. Additionally, big businesses around the world are saying things such as the CEO of Barclays saying that big offices might be a thing of the past, and the Twitter CEO saying that his employees can work from home, quote unquote, forever. So some additional facts to bring in, the usage of remote working tools and communication and collaboration tools have gone through the roof. So Microsoft Teams reported a 775% jump in usage in Microsoft Teams. And Zoom went from 10 million daily active users to 190 million, which is truly staggering in just a period of 3 months. So let's jump over to Justin. What do you think the implications for vendors such as yourself are of this more permanent shift to remote work? And what does this mean in terms of IT departments' business needs?
Well, I think the silver lining here is it's an opportunity for business as usual to be reevaluated, right? This is the first time in living memory that we've had a global pandemic, and the IT is often a thankless job, and it's always a source of problems. But I think in this case, if you really look at it, IT really saved the day. Had a crisis like this happen in the 60s, 70s, or 80s, these businesses would have had no choice but to stop business, because most jobs couldn't be done remotely. So this really kind of, if it was going to hit at some point in modern history, it was really now's the time, because cloud services are so widespread. There was already an initiative to work from home. So I think that if that's a way to look at it and go forward, when you're coming up solutions, is to think about it that way. What has IT done for you lately? Well, it just saved your business probably, even though all the growing pains and challenges went with it. So you're seeing that in adoption, like you said, with Teams and Zoom. The conspiracy theorists can say that, look, Microsoft got a 700% boost. Maybe Bill Gates did get involved in this. But
hey, that's not for this webinar. Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously kidding. But yeah, I think it's a good opportunity to remind business that IT isn't just a necessary evil, right? It's something that makes his business easier and better. And they've learned that they don't need big office space. You don't have to pay those kind of electricity bills and high bandwidth for that many people. And looking at maybe a way to have businesses invest a little bit for their employees' remote workspaces, because when these pandemics happen, now there will actually be a reference point. Oh, yes, this could happen again, and probably will happen again. And there was a period of time where we thought it was going to be short term and only going to last, 2 to 4 weeks, and here we are 4 months in with really no horizon for expectation of when things will go back to normal per se. And not only are people working from home, their kids are not in school, or they're having to learn from home. So even if you don't have great bandwidth to begin with, you're now sharing it during the day with your children's remote classes. And I think companies, for the most part, have been understanding that as these challenges come up, there's going to have to be a little bit of flexibility given to the employees, because they're now expected to work from home and be homeschoolers. And I've seen some of different customers where they've gone ahead and accepted that there's going to need to be maybe 2 or 3 hours less of expectations of when you're actually at the computer doing something, or letting you shift your hours a little bit if you don't have a straight 8 to 5, 9 to 6 requirement for the employees. Kind of giving them some time during the school hours, and then they catch up and maybe work later into the evening. So I think it's just really been an opportunity for big businesses take a step back, and even medium business take a step back and look at where there are lack of efficiencies and economics and paying for things they don't necessarily need. And it's not just an abstract concept now. The work from home and the cloud thing have been talking points for a long time, but now they've gotten face to face and see what they actually can do. So I think if you look at it from an optimistic standpoint, I think there's a lot of good that can be taken from it to prevent this in the future.
Okay. And Jessica, what are your thoughts on the same topic? How has the remote working revolution changed things?
I mean, Justin and Jeff clearly live it and said it very eloquently. When I talk to our customers, we used to always say, look, over the course of the last decade, you went from having to manage the IT infrastructure to also be the chief security officer and also be make sure employees have always on access to data, and also make sure that their laptops are up and running and they're productive all day long. There's been demands and demands on the IT world for so many years, and they've never really gotten the credibility or the acknowledgement and the recognition. And what the COVID pandemic has done is really elevate them to what we've discussed as being a critical business component that actually provides a competitive advantage. And it's, again, what we've always talked about in terms of having a digital first infrastructure is what gives you a competitive advantage. And for years, we've been trying to educate our CIOs and our IT decision makers on how to sell that and pitch that to the C-suite and to the executive team. And overnight, that was sold. And so now there's going to be more of a pull for technology than relying on IT to kind of push it and build the business case and tell the company and the board why it's so critical. So I think it's great for the profession and for what the technology enables. And I truly think this gives us a new opportunity to shine light on some of the hardest jobs that, Justin, you mentioned it, can sometimes be very thankless because it's all the demands, but no one ever says, wow, you're the one that kept us going. So, but I don't think there's a company out there that doesn't recognize that technology is what has kept them going. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, your thoughts on that? Have you felt more appreciated lately?
I mean, I do now. I never think I think Justin, Jessica really framed it up really well. I never really thought of that. That it's just like it in a way it did save a lot of businesses. I mean, we see that there's a lot of businesses that didn't have the privilege or the ability or the technology to continue to keep their doors open. Like, you know, here in Austin with a lot of like the music venues and stuff where there is a lot of industries that we realize that if it wasn't for IT, I mean, this could have been, I mean, the economy is struggling, but this could have been a lot worse if it wasn't for having a lot of this technology that was, flexible enough and agile enough to get this going and get this going quick to keep it going. But I never, so yeah, I do feel like, people are definitely appreciating it a lot more for sure.
Okay. For the rest of this webinar, I want to flip to the other side of the coin and talk about the IT vendor and IT marketer side. So I have a few facts and figures to introduce before we dive into that. But in a survey of IT professionals, they indicated it might be a little bit harder to reach out to them. We've already indicated that IT has been working maybe longer hours. They're busier, so it's harder to reach them. On top of that, Justin touched upon how a lot of times phone systems aren't as readily accessible now. So 16% of IT pros said that they have a physical desk phone anymore. Most of the time, calls are either forwarded to their cell phones or they have to make and receive calls through an app, which is less than ideal and not as convenient as before. So it might be harder for marketers to reach out to their potential clients and prospects. Additionally, we have challenges where everybody's trying to shift to digital marketing now. Even though half of IT pros said they're more likely to attend online events, there's a plethora of events out there. So here's a quote from one IT pro saying there's an increased availability of online events, and it's offset, though, by the increased workload on him supporting remote workers, creating a bigger workload for him. So essentially, they don't have time to attend these online meetups or webinars, even if they have the desire to. So I'm going to flip it back to Jessica. In this environment, has it been challenging for marketers to reach out to IT professionals? And do you have any tips on how you can effectively reach out to these companies that clearly are in need of help, but it might be harder to reach out to them?
Yeah. Well, first I would say, I think all of us are wondering, why is our life so much more packed? Our days are so much busier than they were before. And so it was interesting. That's a great comment from the participant. I would say, yes, like we see everyone has more tax time. Now, much of it is because at least what we see at Dell, a lot of those casual interactions that you could maybe solve a business problem in the hallway is now another meeting, and everything has to be a little more formal. So everyone is maxed out on time. In addition, they have usually a family in the home or other competing priorities. And so what we have found to be most successful is that you really need to connect with what is their pain point. You know, when I talk and partner and collaborate with other marketers, my number one ask is, let's try to actually solve a pain point. And I think the more you address your audience in something that they are challenged on, they will find the time. So what we have found is fewer, more relevant and authentic interactions can drive deeper engagement. We're also seeing incredible engagement in virtual events that we've tried for years and have never really seen an uptick. And people are highly engaged when the topic is relevant and addresses a pain point. We see our customers very much having a good banter back and forth, talking to our engineers and to our experts. So if you give the right resource and the right support in that event, you will have good engagement. And that's ultimately what you're looking for. And then second is, yes, there is a push to digital. There is, we had to reshape our entire marketing strategy going into our summer, which is our Q2. And I would say that you're going to have to try some things and be comfortable if they don't work. But you cannot continue to do the status quo before, because some of those just, like, you could send something to someone's office, but they're not going to be there. So how else can you connect with them in different venues? And you have to look at different marketing vehicles versus kind of looking at the past and trying to just edit it. You have to kind of think different and do different.
Okay.
Yeah, to
Very
add
good
just
tips
to
there.
yeah, to add what Jess was saying, I can't agree more. I mean, look, this just kind of fast forwarded what was happening anyway. We weren't answering our phones because we weren't at our desk. We were missing a lot of emails because our inbox was overflowing. And we know, Spiceworks was kind of born on this. It's just like it comes down to relationships. You have to have a good relationship and you have to find a way to make that relationship kind of feel organic and natural. And nothing brings people together than shared pain points, right? So now, whether you're in marketing or IT, you both experience the same exact event of just like, now you see what we're kind of dealing with, and it kind of makes it a little easier. And that was always the beauty of the Spiceworks community, is you were able to build these organic relationships and have good, meaningful conversations that don't feel like sales pitches, right? They feel like, like what Jess was saying, what is your pain point? Now I know what your pain point, what are you doing to overcome this pain point? So when you have those relationships like that, the old way of getting through, catching people who are hard to catch, are going to work even less now.
Okay. Justin, do you have anything else to add about building relationships or community or just marketing tactics that have or haven't worked for you?
Well, I think that Jeff and Jessica really hit it well, which is, it doesn't have to feel like cold calling anymore. It's more of a relatable experience. Everyone was bit by the same bug, and it's one of those times in history where it's rare, where everybody kind of felt the same thing at the same time. This is where business got difficult, and nobody really did anything wrong. It's just that humanity faced a crisis, and so it's more like a building bridge for the customer time. Here are some things that can help you out of this. We all know what it was like to go through this, and we're grateful that business survived. And one of the ways that it did that was having the backbone infrastructure of IT. So when you look at, are we going to de-invest in on-premises solutions or paying rent and utilities for buildings? Well, maybe we can reallocate some of those funds to building a stronger connectivity solution for all of your employees, so that you're almost immune to these kind of things. And so some of that money comes back on the table that might have been in budgets for rent and those kind of things, where you can put them into solutions like heavier implementation on iDRAC or management tools, even for IT themselves. So I think this is a good time to talk about that. You can't run up to the office to check on the server console. Maybe you're in a building where they've just literally shut down access because of some stay-at-home order. So having the ability to do that stuff, I think business decision makers are much more understanding now to be open to those conversations. Is they're feeling like, what did we miss? What did we do wrong? What could we do better? And I've found that at least in a couple of cases, they've been more open to those conversations, and it's kind of like kick the can down the road on doing remote work or moving to the cloud. That now they're actually asking the question themselves, hey, remember that thing you told me about? I think it was SharePoint, and we talked about doing it, and then we couldn't get to our files easily and collaborate. So was that what it was called? Yes, that's what it was called. Here's how it works. I just find that they've been a lot more receptive to new technologies.
Jessica, have you seen the same thing? Business decision makers as opposed to IT decision makers, have you seen them being more receptive to investing in technology now?
Absolutely. I think I mentioned that even a little earlier. And we're actually spending, as a marketer, I'm now spending more time talking to business decision makers, whereas previous, we always prioritized the IT decision maker first. Now we know we have to do both, because as I mentioned before, the C-suite or those BDMs are now more engaged, and the light bulb has gone off to say, oh, I have to have a digital infrastructure to compete. And so now there's a whole new opportunity to have the conversation.
All right. And we're about to hit time. So let's wrap it up now and let's just go around the circle. We've talked about a lot of different topics today, all of them very important. So if you had one piece of advice for businesses going forward or for marketers who are trying to help those businesses go forward during this uncertain time, feel free to share your tips. And we'll start with Jeff. From the IT pro perspective, where do you see us going forward, and what advice do you have for your peers or for those IT vendors out there?
Oh, just flexibility, man. It's just like that. It doesn't matter what you're doing, whether you're, in marketing, IT, any of it, it all comes down to not being static. I mean, anything, right? If you're static, when the wind comes, you're going to crack. You have to be able to go with it. And we're hitting stuff, and we don't know what the next year is even going to look like. So we have to be willing to be dynamic, to go with the flow, and think outside the box. And like Jess was saying, take chances on things that may or may not work, but don't spend too much time. If it doesn't, you have to be flexible. Anything, if you just keep trying to, shave that square to force it into the circle hole that you've been dealing with for the past, throughout your career, you're going to fail. So you just have to stay flexible. You have to listen. You have to, talk to your peers, have your relationship with your vendors. Again, I've always looked at any vendor that I did business with as a partner. I'm taking money that's not mine and investing it in a big to make their lives easier. So that is a partnership that you have to kind of respect both ways, and just and have these conversations like, look, what's this going to look like in next year, in 5 years? And, you have to be flexible or you're going to crack.
All right, Justin, same question. What advice do you have for your peers going forward or for IT departments out there trying to cope during this time?
So I think one of the benefits that we get from this is a lot of times business felt somewhat cynical or rigid or black and white, and now there's a more human connection to it because, like Jeff said, we all suffer. It was a shared experience, and the human side came out of this. People didn't do anything wrong. It just happened to them. Everybody was impacted on some level. I don't think anybody at all was immune from this experience. So it really does feel more like the customers are receptive to, hey, we really are trying to help you. They're not just trying to sell you something because we have it. So I think this has been really kind of a shining moment, and we tend to do this as humans, right? When we can all be tribal until something unites us. And I think going forward, that's going to be in recent memory for a long time for business decision makers. And so we really do feel like we're in this together. And I have certainly felt that I've had customers who normally wouldn't say anything. Hey, we really appreciate you. We know you did this and then scrambled in a hurry, and we know all your other customers are doing it. But we're really grateful that you were able to help us through this. And those things leave their mark. And so the next time that you come to the table to recommend a solution, there's a reference point for it now. We might recognize where we didn't invest on something because it didn't seem like it was a fit, or we didn't have a use case for it. But you never know what the future is going to bring. Just what's not a use case today doesn't mean something around the corner is coming. People used to think in terms of hurricanes or storms, and not so much just worldwide human events, right? If you talked about an asteroid coming or a terrorist attack, it's like, that would never happen. You'll have bigger problems if that ever happens. But the reality is the bigger things can happen, and you will have bigger problems, but one of the bigger problems you don't want to have is the inability to carry on business. And so I think that having this fresh in the mind is going to open opportunities to have more genuine conversations with customers and less of I have something I need to sell to meet a quota. It's like, this really can help save your business in the future. And here's an example of, how we dodged the bullet this time. Let's buy bulletproof vests.
Sounds good. All right, Jessica, you get the final word, Peter. Jessica. Yeah. So what's your best advice for anybody?
both Jeff and Justin have touched on it, but what I see, and I used to see this in our in-person events all the time, is that we would always start with a round table. And undoubtedly, there is always someone in the room who had the same problem you did, who had just finally launched it, worked on a 2-year project, got it out the door, are now doing troubleshooting. This is the best time to go ask for help. You don't have to figure it out on your own. At Dell, we have your Dell Tech Advisor that you can call, your dedicated rep, to say, hey, I know, here's my problem. What do I do? What are my options? We can connect you with the engineers, and we can connect you with the experts. We can help craft a vision. Our partners do it. Anyone in the IT community can provide that, or even leaning into the community, like the Spiceworks community. In our world, it is a peer-based environment, and you can always ask a friend. And I think the key is don't feel like you have to solve your digital first ecosystem and infrastructure by yourself. Phone a friend and lean into those opportunities that already exist, and as Jeff was mentioning, the relationships that are so key that really make us successful and make you successful.
All right, great. You don't have to tell us twice. We know the power of community at Spiceworks and the power of a lot of different people getting together to solve problems. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining the webinar today, and I'd like to give a special thanks to all of our speakers today. Thank you to Justin, Jessica, and Jeff, the 3 Js, very much for sharing all of your expertise and giving your valuable feedback, and we appreciate you all for joining.